Well, so most of the people on here are former students in the class. Michael is, I wasn't a former student, but he's like a student because he's been coming to a lot of our events. And Egbert is an incoming student. He's going to be at the next class. I think Tom and Lynn are also going to be in the next class again, actually. They're going to take it again. So we have a good collection of people. And Elon is just a friend who's curious what this is all about. And I
I'm
think
just
we're
here so
going
I
to be,
won't get fined.
pardon?
I'm just here so I won't get fined.
Well, that's a good move. Yeah,
Well, I
exactly.
actually have no idea what to expect, so I'm looking forward to this.
Fabulous. Well, welcome everyone to this new Media Shaman Studio for the month. We're going to talk about the state of the Mediasphere. The inauguration, fortunately, seems to have gone down without any violence anywhere, which is good. People are thinking there might be problems in state houses, but not in D.C. obviously, because there's so many people that the police who are not white supremacists probably outnumber the ones who are. So that's a good sign. But so we're going to get right to it. Mark,
Yeah.
take it away.
Welcome, everybody. And I just wanted to begin with a perception practice. For those new to this work, we do what we call perception practices, which is a little bit different than meditation practices. So meditation practices are really concerned with working with our states of consciousness. So they help us to connect to higher and higher states of consciousness, where perception practices are concerned with helping us become aware of our structure of consciousness. And the structure of consciousness, if you think of consciousness as an ocean, the structure of consciousness is the shoreline. It's the boundaries. It's the bottom. It's the shape of it. It's the environment of it. And the states are the waves and the winds that are constantly in flux. So when we're trying to develop and evolve as human beings, we need both. We need to work on both our states of being, which are always kind of moving and changing constantly, and our structure of consciousness, which is the container of which evolves as well, but it evolves much slower. Like the ocean, the shores erode over time and expands the ocean. So what we try to do is with perception practices, we try to speed up that expansion of our field of awareness by making it an object in our awareness. So to try to deepen and expand how we perceive ourselves, each other, and the world. So, and these are, you don't have to have your eyes open or closed. You can do them anywhere, anytime, in the midst of activity. Once you learn one, you could do it really quick and easy. So I want to start with a very simple one for this moment, for us to kind of hold the space here in the context of where we are at right now, this moment in space and time. So get in a comfortable position and eyes open or closed, depending on what helps you to visualize things inside your mind. Now I want you to bring your awareness to your thoughts. What are you thinking about right now, in this moment? And now extend that awareness to include your feelings. What are you feeling right now? And try to extend that awareness further, holding both in your mind or in your being, and extend it to your physical sensations, how you feel in your body. I want you to try to extend that even further. Either open your eyes or imagine, if your eyes are closed, the space around you, the chair or sofa, or whatever you're sitting on, the objects in your space, your computer, your technology that you're using right now to hear my voice, to connect with this space. And now I want you to imagine that the technology that's capturing our image and our sounds, imagine how it is taking those and translating them into bits of information and transmitting them through wires or wirelessly or both around the world. And how each of those, for each of us, is entering the technologies of each other amidst this vast global web of bits of beingness moving around the planet. And then see if you could feel into this collective space that we have right now. Some of us are across oceans from each other, across time zones from each other, relating to each other in this sphere of beingness. See if you can feel that this sphere of beingness that we're in right now is inside of this larger sphere of beingness with millions of others around the world in other spheres of beingness. And in this big media sphere, information is flowing into us and through us and around us. What's happening in the world? What's happening in our own city, our own state, our own countries, our own continents, just all of this is part of where we are right now. We're sitting inside of. And now, when you're ready, you could come back into our little mini media sphere here. And I usually start with a mini kind of lecture, but what I'd like to do this time is start with us each going around and just expressing where we're at right now with what's going on in the world, especially around this moment in the United States, anyways, of the inauguration of the President of the United States, just to get a sense of what you're experiencing, your perception of it is, and try to hold what you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you feel in your body about this. And also, if you're in the United States, what that means for you. And if you're not, what it means for you, looking from the outside, and how it kind of connects with anything in your own country or spheres of beingness. To see if we can get a sense of where we are all at. So does anyone feel the call to begin?
I'll go. I just think it's an amazing time to be alive in our country, needing to face the enemy within. So many enemies within that are in our exist in, primarily in our minds. I mean, not to say that there isn't a lot of actual work to be done, but the fear and separation and violence. But I've been thinking a lot about the words pride and honor. So growing up in a military family and also having this very unspoken Southern history, all this has just really been profound for me in realizing where kind of so much of my energy has been locked away in this kind of thing that was never discussed in our family. So that's where I am, growing up. That, my brother has spent this last month in Rifle, Colorado, where that woman came from, the new woman on the scene in Washington who wants to open carry the Glock. And so she went into my brother went into that woman's cafe where all the waitresses wear their guns. And the Lauren Boebert, I think that's what her name is, was her husband was in the corner talking to his wife on the phone while his wife is in hiding, in the Capitol. So it's just a really wild time, but I'm glad that things are more out in the open. It seems like Obama really provoked something to come to the surface that was really needing to be addressed. So I think we're just beginning to look at something more clearly. So that's where I am. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess maybe I can go. So I'm from Toronto. I'm living in Toronto here, Canadian. And, well, obviously we're very close to the States. So, and a lot of our media comes from the States. And, I guess my personal interest, I like the intellectual dark web. So I pay a lot of attention to that. And I think it has intersections with, integral. And, I guess, there's a lot of things you can say about Trump and the whole situation. And, I think Trump is very much an anti-green. And my worry, I guess, is that the Democrat Party, like I'd hope that because there needs to be self-reflection too, right? And I guess because of the culture war between kind of green and modern and traditional, there's kind of that, I guess, considered a perspectival. So they only see their perspective. They don't really see the other perspective. And so I guess what my hope is that we can move to a more integral or more a way to see values. And I don't know if that necessarily explains much, but I understand what happened at the storming of what happened in Washington was uncalled for, and definitely there needs to be consequences for those kind of people that did that. But that there's also on the other side, there's also difficulties too, right? So I, anyways, but it's hard to kind of, I think right now in our politically climate to kind of take a middle position or to try to hear both sides. I find that you're vilified by each side when you do that. But anyway, and so that's sort of my take. I do worry about censorship, and I do worry about kind of, that kind of the green trying to censor things, and they don't want to hear kind of the other perspective. Like they're very quick to say it's like hate or quick to say it. And I just think that that's why I think America is a kind of an important country, because the free speech is protected. And anyway, I think there's a lot to be said, right? And there are worries about certain groups, and yeah, so that needs to be discussed too. But anyway, so I'm just kind of rambling now, but that's sort of where I'm situated. I kind of, but I'm very much liberal. So I find it just funny, because I feel like you kind of get pushed out of your party, and you kind of feel like, yeah, you don't necessarily always have a place to stay that makes sense, or like a home anymore. Anyway, so that's just my thought.
Thank you. Thank you. That brings up something I just want to throw in here real quick, and that this, for those who are not familiar with integral theory, one of the things that Blake brought up is the different structures of consciousness and different worldviews, and the a-perspectival. That is, each stage that is right now in struggle here cannot really see each other. And when you step out, each kind of structure has their own boundary in terms of their ideological window. And if you kind of agree with most of one window, but some of your views are outside that window, the stage kind of goes, nope, you're out. So, and that's true of all sides. All those different structures, it's part of the evolutionary thing, is that these structures are in what we call the first tier of development. And it is not until the integral structure where we are actually able to see the value across these worldviews and perspectival fields. So I just wanted to kind of expand that for everybody here.
Yeah,
Awesome.
my own. Oh, go ahead, Tom.
No, go ahead, Jonathan.
My own feeling is that it's almost like a wound that now is going to begin to sort of heal, and no one really knows what form that's going to take. So because Trump tore open this gaping wound by being such a chaos agent, that now that we have this, which by all definitions really a neoliberal back in the White House, which many people are not happy about, but they're happy that we don't have this active abuser, essentially. So the question now is going to be, how much can people begin to integrate all the worst of the last three presidents and separate that from the really horrors in a lot of ways of the just previous president? And so how much forward motion will we have in America? And that's a lot of that is, that practice that Mark did is that 4-quadrant practice, looking at the two individual, what's going on inside your head, and all of our mental health has been compromised by the last 4 years, and what's around you, and then what are the two collective, language and culture have been also deeply affected by that. And the question is, can we get progress in our social structures by healing all these other domains as well, all at the same time? So it's very hard to know where we're going forward, but it's a promising step that we're not actively being abused again.
So I have been very aware of what all three of you have brought up so far. And a couple of articles that I really liked, one by a friend, acquaintance who I wrote back and forth to last week, Luis Alberto Urrea in The Atlantic. Highly recommend that article. And then another one, I keep forgetting the guy's name. I think, Mark, I posted it somewhere. His name starts with U, but he listed the steps, the fascist takeover steps that Trump had gone through and said, we should have stopped him here, we should have stopped him here, we should have stopped him here. And that kind of ties in with the theme of that was a lot more out there the last week and a half, that this isn't just a few yahoos. These are some very highly organized, very well-funded groups, right-wing groups that are truly fascist, some of them. However, my main experience, especially again the last week or so, is that I am in this network. This is part of it. Nora Bateson, Joe Brewer, Ria's collective presencing groups that are amazing to me, where it is this, people are just present with each other in across beyond these levels of development to a degree. Many of them are definitely integral or aperspectival already. There is not just a community, but a communion that's going on. And it amazes me, all these people know each other. It amazes me, I just heard Jeremy's going to be part of this group, and that Nora and Joe presented a couple months ago together. And none of this would have happened without COVID. And so I feel very much, and I posted on Facebook, that I'm amazed the people I keep meeting now, some my age and some in their 20s, many in their 20s. And now I've just gotten involved with the solar punk group, which is also amazing, which is this genre of science fiction that instead of a dystopian future, it's a regenerative future. And the fiction that so far has only mainly been in literature and a little animation is set in the present, but also in a regenerative future, not a dystopian one. And also starts to play with the aperspectival and Gebser's integral version of the enfolded past, present, and future. And so, which is what my whole project is focused on too. And the resonance, I love that word, I keep using it, the resonance that's happening despite all of this other disruption and lack of resonance, just gives me, I wouldn't call it hope because it's not future-based, it's just already present. And I can feel this movement, as hard as it might be to get to, of the aperspectival, of moving from the perspectival into the aperspectival. And I definitely am becoming more of a Gebserian than a Wilberian. I'm a lot less focused on all these different levels and more on a larger unfoldment of time and perspective.
Thank you. So let's continue on with where we're at and how we're experiencing this moment. If anyone wants to go next.
I can, if you like. So we've actually got a massive storm here at the moment, Storm Christoph. So a physical storm with 50, 60 mile an hour winds and horizontal rain. So although it feels extremely stormy outside, I've got water coming in one of our old chimneys because we have a very old house. So I feel like, you know, it's completely crazy out there. But actually inside feeling very calm. And I think Trump coming in, at least for us here, it's going out, sorry, is really positive. Whew, yeah, thank God he's gone. Because, you know, our government was moving more and more and thought that they were protected and could get away with a lot of stuff that I think the truth is coming out now because we have Brexit. People are beginning to see what that means, and the lies are unfolding every day now. So, you know, even those that were very, very, you know, well, it's never going to be like that. Actually, it is, and it started. And so you have a massive realization going on across the whole country, which is quite interesting. And there's a whole group that were already kind of working together in different setups who are now holding to truth, holding to fact, holding holding to account every day that a lie is spilled. Right, this is a lie, and so that started happening now. So that's all very positive. So I'm feeling quite, getting some meaning back. It's moved from the pure desperation in a way. Yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm glad. For us, it's positive. And massive relief, actually, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. It's good to hear that perspective.
I'll go next. I'm feeling, last night I watched the memorial for the 400,000 dead with that, and I was very tearful. And today there was a lot of anxiety and a lot of calming my mother down, who's in England. She rings me up and goes, "Oh, the riots near you. Oh my God." So just anxiety today and a sense of relief that he's gone. But what are we going to do now? So that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Michael.
I'll go next. Thank you very much for all your words and your different perspectives. I live in Germany, so in the middle of Europe, and there's a lot of things going on. And I was also thinking of what's going on in Britain. I have family in Britain, and it's a country I love very much. And I was really distressed about Brexit. And I feel very relieved by people waking up to the reality, the truth of what maybe has been lost, but can also be recovered, I hope. And that is much more that sort of connects and binds us than the drive to separate. And yeah, these days and today, of course, it's an inflection point. I've started to wonder if we already really understand where this dark tide we've been experiencing the last few years has come from, how it has built, and if this really is the point where it's turning and ebbing away, or if there is going to be much more, especially in Europe, in the different countries. That's really interesting here, is that all the different neighboring countries we have are in different stages and different situations, and exposed to different threats in the pandemic, and also politically with what could happen, interconnected with these two things. So yeah, I feel hopeful and I feel relieved, but I can also see a great complexity here in Europe in the context of the different countries we have here.
Thank you, Egbert. That's great to have that extended perspective for the other countries. That's really wonderful. Thank you.
I would like to go next, if possible.
Yes, thank you, Kelly.
Yep. I wanted to thank everybody for sharing your perspectives at the moment. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm currently in France, although I have family in the US, and I'm very grateful that there was a peaceful transition of power, which is not often the case in a lot of other parts of the world. I guess many of us were afraid of what might happen, but now we see that for now, it seems to be all right. I've had a dense day, so I have yet to watch the entire inauguration, but I've seen extracts, including Amanda Gorman's poem. And when President Biden spoke of unity, I was quite touched. This word unity has been really important to me because I recently started an online training program for, it's called the Youth Delegate Program, and it's for young people who are interested in working towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And it's really, the idea is by 2030, we unite to, as young people, but also of different people, of people of all ages to unite for like a more sustainable future. And there's this project that we're going to be working on called Gen Unite to kind of unite different generations of people. So I'm actually interested in kind of hearing different perspectives and kind of getting everybody's views on the world and maybe what might happen in the next few years. And at least we know maybe in the next 5 years, we'll see some change. I know that President Biden seems more open to creating space for people of more people of color, people who are differently gendered, all really for more inclusion. And I feel that's promising. Hopefully he'll have more peaceful diplomatic policy. So here in the EU, we can, hopefully there'll be a more harmonious international relations as well. But in any case, I'm really grateful to be here with you all today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. So, Alana, if you want to speak, that's okay. If not, that's okay too, because I'm new here. It's okay. Okay, cool. So, Jonathan, did you want to say anything before I?
Well, I mean,
chime in?
I think we all know that the media sphere is in a state of flux. That when we talk about the media sphere, we're talking about all the different voices. And in a way, there are multiple media spheres that are intersecting. Many of them have different control systems or different ownership or different interests. Oh, Lisa is coming in. So we kind of have a situation now, and we've just found out now that much of our media sphere is under the control of 3 companies in Silicon Valley. We just erased an entire social media network overnight at the request of the US government. So that's kind of a scary thought as well. Twitter is censoring a lot, and YouTube is censoring a lot. So in that sense, there's some things that are scary, but there's also the problem that these systems have been set up with perverse incentives that incentivize stickiness and attention, so therefore they tend to naturally pull people into more conflict, because when your tribe has conflict, it actually reinforces the strength of the tribe from an evolutionary standpoint, while also increasing the division between your tribe and the other tribe. So we've seen this on all sides, a lot of division, because a lot of the social media networks have weaponized attention and used algorithms to try to draw more attention, which ends up drawing people towards the most stimulating or the most controversial or the most tribalized content or the most radical content in a lot of cases. So, and
Thank you, Jim.
yeah, so you could maybe go into that if you want.
Yeah, we just want to welcome Lisa. Yeah, and we just did a round robin of where people are at in this moment, and what they're feeling. If you want to say something, you're welcome to. If not, you could just listen. It's fine.
Are my speakers working? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry for joining late. I just saw the notice and logged in. And so I don't know where everybody's at, but where I'm at is a very happy place and kind of relieved. We still have a lot of work to do with the problems that we have, and the media on the right is going to cause a lot more problems. But I think just having the immediate threat and the person no longer in office has reduced the risk that we face. So that's I've got other things going on right now, so I'll probably be listening the rest of the time, but thankful you guys are doing this event. Thank you. And so again, apologies for interrupting.
Thank you for joining in. Okay, so we have, in our field, we have people around the world reflecting what's happening. And also, I wanted to kind of try to frame this in a way to help us understand a bigger picture here. Jonathan, if you could put up the slide. When we're experiencing things, and especially through the media sphere, but even in everyday life, we have there's different levels of situational awareness. And one of the key elements here is that in between the levels, we can get caught. So I just want to go over the levels real quick. And as I'm talking about it, if you could kind of hold where you feel you're at in some of your reactions and your perceptions as we go through. So at the baseline is your subjective experience of what's going on, what you're bringing to the table, your own biases. You know, if you're coming from, you know, a certain ideology or frame of reference, your even your faith tradition, or even your own history and your own evolution, your own wounds, you know, they all shaped how we perceive things. And so when we're looking outside, we're looking through that lens. And then, so that's like the baseline level that we start at when we're trying to understand what's going on. Then we have the relational level. So, you know, it's like if we're in a relationship with somebody, you know, and we're both in an experience, you know, it's like you're going, you know, okay, so what's happening, you know, and what's happening between us? We just had a sharing at the relational level of what we were perceiving. So we were sharing our subjective views in a relational field. And as we shared, we probably started to expand our awareness a bit, just because we're getting more subjective input on what's going on. And this also, as we listen to each other, that's expanding, and that's a relational field as we're listening to someone. But then collectively, now that we've all shared and listened to each other, now we're in a level of a group field. So all of us have shared our subjective levels. And as we have, we've kind of listened to each other in a relational field. But as we got more and more of these relational field inputs, now we're sitting in a group field that we all have a shared awareness to some degree of the different perspectives in this field. So that's a group level. Now, in the real world, it could be, you know, if we're at a protest and, you know, we're looking at it, you know, and we have someone else right next to us and we're going through it together, you know, that's the relational. And then if we're in one group as opposed to another group, then there's that. And then at the cultural level. So what culture or subcultures are we a part of that is affecting how we're perceiving and is involved in this moment? And then there's the social level. Now, the social level is what we often feel as the big picture. An example of the social level is what Jonathan was talking about, in that, you know, how different companies in our society are acting to affect, and their input and effect and what's going on there. When we talk about democracy and fascism, that's all at the social level. Now, beyond that, see, all of these levels up until the social level are almost always inside of the polarization field. The the first tier of consciousness, the first many stages, one of the big kind of patterns we have is polarization, either or, black, white. And some structures of consciousness, like the traditional stage, has a more extreme upfront polarization, good and evil, right and wrong. But each other stage, we have our own polarizations. But when we get to the meta levels, we can start stepping outside of the polarization. Now, just real quick here, many of us kind of touched on that those last 4 years in the United States has been chaotic, but unearthed some things. And when we start to get to the meta levels, we could start seeing things like what's been happening. There's some positive, what's been happening has larger patterns. And the first level we call psychosocial systemic. This is on the border between the kind of more non-dual frames. This one is still inside the polarization field. An example would be looking at what's happening from the framework of nonlinear warfare is one that's actually out there. The military, a lot of military people are in all countries are looking at what's going on from this frame. And that is, we are, in a sense, we are in the middle of a world war, but it's a new form of war. They call it postmodern or nonlinear warfare, where it's a battle for our consciousness. And there are forces, here's the polarization. There are forces trying to manipulate us and to cause this polarization to increase, to create chaos. Now that's still a polarization field, but it's almost like a polarization field looking at the other polarizations. But when we get more into the systems, looking at it, we start looking at interconnectedness, complexity, contextuality. We start stepping outside of polarization, and then when we get into the evolutionary framework, we start seeing the bigger picture in terms of the whole arc of our evolution as a species or as in societies, And then we get to the meta-narrative frameworks where a lot of people, and some of us have been talking about, there's a lot of people out there trying to find the better way beyond what's going on. And this is kind of the meta-narratives of the great transition that we're in. That this moment or this time, we are going through a civilization-wide paradigm shift. And this is all a part of it. And from this perspective, Brexit, Trump, and Trumpism, and MAGA, and all the other kind of forms that we think have caused chaos, or or if we are outside of them. If we're inside of them, we have a different perspective, but all of them, and many of us brought this up too, have opened up things that we have not faced before. So when we look at, in a way, this is important for us, because if we're going through a civilization-wide paradigm shift, before we can make that shift, we have to deal with our shadow material, individually and collectively. as well as letting go of all of our previous construct fields. You could take off the slide now, Jonathan, thank you. So from that perspective, everything is perfect. Because right now in this moment, a lot of things that we have not been aware of, that we have not dealt with, have come up. And now the choice is, how do we work with it? What do we do about it? And, you know, it might be easy to kind of just try to go back to the way it used to be and not face anything. Or to get caught in that polarization field. Those are very kind of almost instinctual kind of things. You know, like a lot of us would feel like, oh man, thank God this is over. But it's not, because our shadow has come up. And unless we deal with it, it's not going away. Now we could take a moment to rest, as Jonathan was saying, that at least the shadow waker upper for the moment is still. So the pot has been stirred, and at least it's been stopped from stirring right now. Okay, but the pot's been stirred. And this stuff has come up. So how do we heal this collective trauma? But it's a trauma that is, what's come up has been inside of us as a, I like to talk about, for me, the highest frame we can hold, the biggest picture we can hold is the collective self frame. And I'm not talking about some Aquarian idea, you know, that we are all one. I'm talking about, according to science, once we get to the molecular level, there is no separate beingness. There's an ocean of different vibrating frequencies of molecules, that this body is vibrating at a different molecular frequency than the molecules around me. But it's not that we're separate. And then when you get down to the atomic and subatomic and quantum, the separation even is more diffuse. And with advances in neurophysics, they're really now talking about the highest likelihood is that consciousness is a quantum phenomenon, which means it transcends time and space. So in essence, there is a collective self. And so from this perspective, if we hold that perspective and this other, and seeing all these other levels, but recognizing that these are all kind of, you know, this is like Wilbur talks about, or he quotes someone else who I forgot, is it's turtles all the way up and all the way down. I think it's from a Native American kind of concept of the universe that's connected to what they call the United States in some tribes, Turtle Island. But it's turtles all the way up and all the way down. So this is a nested awareness, so that at the quantum level, we could look at this as exposure therapy for our collective self. So what is the lesson for our collective self? What we are trying to learn as a collective body? What is the pandemic trying to teach us as a collective body? And some of us have already kind of talked about some of the lessons that have come out of it. And so one of the keys about exposure therapy is that we learn through embodied experience. That's why in our courses we focus on three brains. Scientists have discovered that that there are neural processing centers in the head brain, in the heart, and the gut. And they communicate with each other constantly, but they communicate in different languages. But we don't fully get something, grok something. I don't know if everyone's familiar with that word. It's from a 1960s or 70s science fiction book called Stranger in a Strange Land. And it's knowingness that is in your whole being. It's a full being knowingness. Now, when we get an idea in our heads, in our head brain, it's great. And we have these thoughts and stuff, but it's very hard for us to make that an embodied experience that we always act on. You know, every New Year's, you could say, oh, I'm gonna change this. But if the heart brain and head brain aren't there, ain't nothing's gonna change. That's why we often kind of evolve the most through an experience, because our head brain experiences with thought and ideas and perception and understanding. Our heart brain is emotional experience. And our gut brain is the body. It's like if we, that's why in our courses we have you trying to create something. You're trying to manifest something, you physicalize it, because the gut brain learns through physicalness, through embodiedness. So, and when we get all three, then we get it. So if we hold, and so in exposure therapy, you try to enter experiences that help you to heal something. So if it's true on the individual level, it's often always true on the collective level. So I found that the best way for us to be able to work with what's going on and really heal it without creating more repressed, buried shadows is we have to do the shadow work and be aware of it and recognize it. But if we recognize it and hold it as our own individual exposure therapy, but recognize that we're also working this for the collective self. And then when we look at what's going on in the world, understanding that it's probably exposure therapy for the collective self, and we try to figure out what that is, then we could help others too. But we have to keep trying to heal ourselves while we're helping others. And the key here is when we look at what's going on in the world right now, and everybody in the different countries have expressed the same thing in a way. When we look at this from the collective self perspective, what I hear everybody talking about, and when we go online, I don't know if anybody has set up their Twitter feed with the methodology that I put out there. But I was watching it this morning as everything was unfolding. And what you see is everyone was perceiving what was going on from their reality bubbles. It was, euphoria in the neo-liberal field. It was in the progressive field, it was still, holding on to, this is back to the same normal. This is, it's like, and it's not the happy ending that you think, because there's all this work left to do, and there's all this that, that the problem's still here. It's not being, addressed. Then you get into the mainstream right wing, and it's kind of a duality between, it's good that it's a peaceful transfer of power and all that, but it's not going to be long before the liberals start to do their stuff, that kind of thing. Then when you get to the alt-right, the harder rights zones, you get to really kind of the opposite of that euphoria. You think this is over, it's not over at all. So it's like, so you get this, so the polarity doesn't go away with words. It's, this polarity entrenchment is deep, and it's in all of us. So in a way, polarity starts to really come up to the surface as the lesson we're supposed to deal with. How do we transcend polarity itself in all of its forms? So how do I become aware of my own polarity patterns? And when I'm when I'm polarizing what I'm seeing and all that, and then recognizing too that no one is the enemy. We're all caught in the polarization field. Einstein said that we can't solve a problem with the consciousness that created it. And in the moment that we're in with a civilization-wide paradigm shift, if you listen to all of the wondrous people who are surfing the edge and asking what's next, there's kind of an agreement that from one perspective, we're trying to shift from a nation state centered structural system, social systems, to a more global system, because our technologies are so far ahead of the nation state structure, we can't solve it from the structure. But to shift from nation centric to global centric means that we have to recognize our interconnectedness. We have to go beyond, to some degree, polarization. So the dance here is to work with our shadow material, to work with polarization itself, and to let all this deconstruct our old paradigms and try to enter the liminal space so we could get to a future unlike the past. Because with the old paradigms in our head, we could only project that into the future. So if we don't get rid of our shadow material, and if we don't get rid of our old paradigms, whatever future we think of or try to create will be coming from that.
Well, we are past our 1 hour point a little bit. But if anyone has any final comments or thoughts.
It's interesting what you're saying, Mark, because I kind of had to get over feeling completely aggrieved by very extreme Brexiteers who are either living close to me or within my family. And it's like your mind is screaming, how can you possibly be thinking these things when it is so blindingly obvious that it's wrong? But then you have to go beyond that in a way and say, look, they're still a really nice person. Even the views are a bit weird. And so I've spent the last year or more just having to do that all the time. It is quite exhausting. But there is a point where you say, okay, it's okay. And you just kind of accept it in a way. Not that you agree with it, not that you do anything with it, but you just say, okay, that's what it's like.
One of the things I think that the left in general, or the neoliberal left, hasn't really dealt with is the total failure of the neoliberal order to make the world better for average, at least in America, and I think that's true in England and many other places, is that whenever people are like, how can you support Brexit? A lot of them are probably, we just want something to break the system because the system is so rotted and not serving the needs and desires of the people. And I think I would say that the reaction is the wrong approach, like just like Trump. You either can go into a mythic direction or you can go into a pluralistic direction like Bernie. But the distaste for the system as it exists, I think, is actually understandable, and you have to acknowledge that. But a lot of people didn't really want to acknowledge that. They're like, oh, thank goodness we're back to having a decent man like Biden in. And if you look at Biden's record, it's really not something that a lot of people are proud of, but people convince themselves to be proud of it and happy that he's in, you know. But when you look at the percentage of Americans that support Medicare for all and all these other policies that are really not controversial, and yet they don't happen. So I think there's a lot of that too. People just wanting to break the system because the system is already broken and they just need to rest it.
Yeah, us, it's a bit more complicated. It goes back to a long time ago, and the view that England has of itself, which is no longer realistic. You know, it's much more complicated than that. And we have those systems which do work. They've had 10 years of austerity, but in general, we have a national health service and things like that. So from that perspective, people are taken care of.
But you know, the failure of the liberal order, while it did great things in terms of, you know, it did do great things, but see, that's the trick, is it's still flawed, you know, and
but places like Scandinavia,
and that's, but it's normal because this is all, the neoliberal order was part of this is still in the nation-centric field. So the reason why the neoliberal order could not really solve problems for everybody, for all domains, is because it was still not at the integral stage.
There was no framework for them to work together on the large, huge things like climate change or migrant problems, because what body coordinates that?
That's the key, because we're all still stuck in this nation-centric field. Even what Jonathan said, it's still, that's representative of the progressive frame. And that's an awakening that the progressives have that the liberals don't understand. So in a way, the progressive is trying to point out the faults, the limits of the liberal, you know, but they don't have the answer either, because all of us are still in the old civilization paradigm. And our problems are beyond that. So the reason why the neoliberal field could not solve it is because they're still inside of this old civilization-wide paradigm frame.
Well, I think about, sorry, go ahead.
Well, the only thing I was going to mention is just that, I think Wilbur often makes the point that it's a problem of consciousness, not always necessarily a problem of politics per se. And, if enough people rise up in terms of consciousness, a lot of these issues perhaps can be solved. Like what you're saying, like, global warming or some of these more, I guess, global centric problems, it takes a kind of a global centric perspective to see it, because more, I guess, national centric or people, they don't necessarily even acknowledge that global warming is necessarily a problem because they can only see within their kind of country level or their nation-centric perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah. This brings up a great point. Thank you. But what's going on here is even more complex, because our technologies are evolving so fast through the structures of consciousness. Now, we teach this in the courses. When human beings create something, our structure of consciousness is expressed in that thing. So the smartphone is actually an integral technology.
Yeah.
And it helps us become integral. So technology and our collective consciousness and our individual consciousness are co-evolving. Now, but our collective consciousness is evolving much slower than our technologies. So the gap between the cutting edge of our technologies and the lowest edge of the structure of consciousness that has collective power is 4 to 5 stages apart. And while our social systems are actually still at rational industrial, nation-centric, our communication and economic technologies are at the global centric. Our cultures are caught between traditional and modern and postmodern. But the key is what Blake was talking about is, while we need to shift our social structures from modern to postmodern, or from nation-centric to global-centric, our center of gravity has to be shifted more towards the integral, so we could communicate and make those choices outside of the polarization field. So we do need more percentage into the integral field. So if you look at, it's like, so the collective self field we've got. So let's say we're each an individual cell in this field. If 50% are at one stage and 20% are at the other, whatever, then there's a certain kind of collective zeitgeist that happens, and there's a balance. And they say, there is this kind of idea that when you get a certain percentage of a population at a certain structure, their capacity to affect the system shifts kind of exponentially. Some say it's 10%, some say 20%, somewhere in there 10 to 20 to 30%. So right now, integral, at least 5 years ago when they did the study, they kind of conjectured that the integral was at 5%, 5 or 6. So if we can get the integral to anywhere between 10 to 20, we might be able to, to do this. But that's so, the key is that enough of us have to get beyond the polarization field to shift the collective center of gravity. So the idea is there's a center of gravity of all of these worldview fields, different people with different worldviews. So right now in the States, it's kind of 50-50 between left, right, which is traditional postmodern consciousness. But then in the middle, there's a big percentage in between. So there's like this rainbow. But that's kind of the field, with not enough at integral to be able to see all of them and transcend the polarization.
Yeah.
To shift the center of gravity. So in a way, it's kind of like one of the things that if we could all strive to try to get beyond that polarization field, to see the different structures and their value. And if we can look at a problem from everybody's perspective and not just compromise between them, but see how each perspective has a truth. If we hold that frame, it's kind of like the story that I've heard in both Sufi and in other traditions of the three blind men. I guess I'll tell it really again, it's a short one. Three blind men are walking through a forest, they come to a clearing, and they have to sense their way across. So they're all kind of sensing. And they're walking, and the first one, who's in front of everybody, he comes against what he feels like a wall. He's feeling, goes, wait, there's a wall, there's a wall. And so the second guy comes and he's like feeling, and he goes, oh no, it's a snake. It's like moving this kind of tube, and it's a snake. And then the third guy comes and he's like, like reaching down, and he goes, no, it's a tree, because he felt like a stump. And this old lady comes in and she looks and she goes, what are you guys doing touching that elephant? So if we look at all the perspectives, left, right, liberal, progressive, conservative, alt-right, rhino, all of these, and look at, say, how are they looking at the elephant? Because we're each looking at something. The 10 people, the old thing of 10 people see an accident, there's 10 accidents, right?
Yeah.
So if we could integrate the perspective of fields, honoring each other, because as we evolve, we transcend and include them. So they're all in us. But we can get caught, and then people who are caught, they then kind of try to use their influence either with technologies, like propaganda or whatever, to kind of convince everybody about their perspective because they think it's the right one. So yeah, there's a war in our consciousness, but it's by people caught in their own fields, believing that that is the only truth, and trying to, in their minds, they're trying to fix the world,
So I noticed Kelly has her hand up.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I believe it's so important right now to integrate other multiple perspectives. And I believe it was Blake who mentioned about, and Tom and Blake, when you mentioned global centric issues, a shift towards concern towards global centric issues. I recently read a book that I highly recommend. It's Good Economics for Hard Times by Esther Duflo and Abhijit Banjali. I believe they won the Nobel Prize for Economics recently. It's an excellent book, and they focus a lot on the economics of developing nations. But after a point, they start to talk about the issues like the current challenges that affect all of us, including climate change and issues of migration from different countries, and I believe that in the coming years, we are going to be forced to shift to a global centric perspective. And I know that I feel this is the truth. This is just my felt experience, that, and it may be people my age, this is what we are concerned about. And I agree also that we need to, part of that will be a healing of consciousness as well, maybe interfaith practices, spiritual practices. I believe we'll have there's space there in multiple ways, and just refocusing perhaps on returning to values that connect us all, and more human. Just, I don't have the answers, but I feel yeah, I just wanted to share those thoughts. And again, thank you.
And I think part of that new, more effective globalism will include, which neoliberal globalism didn't, is the local and the regional. And the difference, the functional globalism will acknowledge those other levels, and that they all need to interact.
That brings up to me a great kind of example that we can use. So if one of the things that the right brings to this table is, when we talk about globalization and globalism, yes, we've kind of advanced into a global-centric field in some domains, but a globalism driven by capitalism is not necessarily a healthy form of globalism. Also, they warn us, it's like often when they hear the idea of globalism, they think of one world government and the destruction of national identity. Whereas what we're talking about is more of a nested awareness reality where we recognize local, and it's like, so there's me, there's my community, there's the greater community that we are in, there is the greater, it's like this, and they're all intertwined with each other, and they all have value. It's not saying that it's the end of the nation state or countries. It's that they are not our center of gravity. They're not, I'm a global citizen first. I'm a human being first, but I am also an American. I also have a faith tradition. I'm also a Californian. I'm also, I'm also, that doesn't mean that any of that has to go away or that it has to have any less value. I mean, when we're looking at local issues, yeah, we have to deal with local issues. But when we're dealing with global issues, we have to be able to transcend our other, our other identifying fields, to hold them lightly.
Yeah.
And to recognize that first and foremost, I'm a human being.
Yeah.
Lynn, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, I that's part of why I was really glad to see Garth Brooks on the stage this morning to represent that kind of Western cowboy independent spirit.
Yeah.
But I think that, from when Blake said something about kind of moving towards the middle, or how do we find ourselves not wanting to be in the left, the more liberal, but that I think it kind of takes me back to that green goo idea that we had in the last series of classes. It's like this, what is this? But I think that what we've gone through is maybe in part triggered by the global aspects, the borderless aspects of the tech world, which their motto is like move fast, break things, right? So they broke it. they broke it, and now we're, maybe we will be able to come back to having that critical race theory, which is now like censoring that. Maybe it will be allowed back in once the inflammation has like died down a little bit, and we can find the good in that.
When
free-
when something is broken,
Yeah.
when a heart is broken,
Yes.
when you experience a loss, it's often the way we grow the deepest and the most is that our old beingness, our old something that we've been attached to has been broken.
Yeah.
So, it's like going beyond where we've been often entails something being lost, something being broken open. So it's like, I don't know who said it. I think it was a Sufi or whatever, or many authors, but a broken heart can give us a choice between closing it down or letting it open even fuller.
Yeah. Truly break.
Truly break open.
Break into something much bigger than, oh, my heart. Yeah.
And what Blake is talking about, and what the dark web is kind of working with, is the breaking open of the paradigm, the neoliberal paradigm field. If you step out of it a little bit, that old paradigm will kind of say you don't belong in it anymore because you're not inside of the paradigm completely. But we have to break down all of our paradigms to make this transition. So every time somebody breaks out of their paradigm, it's a good thing. It's hard, but it's a good thing. If you're a Democrat, Republican, if you kind of are locked into an ideological field, you're lost. You won't be able to make this transition. It'll be much harder for you. The easiest way now is to work consciously to transcend these construct fields that they're natural. When we're born, we start creating construct fields. When we learn a language, it creates a construct field. What our society teaches us is important is part of the language. If I'm an Eskimo, there are like 50 words for snow. It's like, so that's, so what, and how, it's like some languages have words that another language doesn't even have. Like the word zeitgeist from German. The English language doesn't have one, so we appropriate it. But that is kind of like, the word zeitgeist is outside of that linguistic field. That's a construct field that we then hold. When I see a tree, spiritual teachers talk about this all the time. Thich Nhat Hanh, talks about, and a lot of people in the Buddhist tradition talks about, we have to enter the beginner's mind. The beginner's mind is recognizing that when I look at a tree, I'm not seeing the tree. I'm seeing all my experiences of that thing called tree within the frame of that linguistic frame of tree. I once saw a little girl, I forgot, she was walking, so I don't know if she was 3 or whatever, but first time she saw a redwood tree. And it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. Looking at her, she was like this, like, oh my, what is this thing? It's just like, it's like, she just discovered, some great and wild frontier I'd never seen, you know. She didn't know. And it was like, I mean, she hugged it. So it was just like this, like profound experience for her. And she didn't know it was a tree like the other trees in her yard. This was like something else. So we have to kind of enter that field in order to actually have a future that isn't the same as the past.
Yeah.
But we can't enter that like she did, because that was at the beginning of her construct field construction. We have to deconstruct it. It's a lot harder for us.
And it's fraught. I know one of the Rebel Wisdom podcasts a little while ago with Eric Davis, who's sort of a psychedelic shaman, he was talking about there's a door, you can walk through that door, which is that doorway out of your constructs, but then you have the option of either going in the paranoid route and becoming either QAnon, or you realize nothing is what I thought it was, or you have to choose to become a radical agnostic and realize nothing is what I thought it was. Now I have to be comfortable in the radical agnosticism and try to build a framework fresh, being aware that many people are trying to affect and infect and create the framework for me. So that's part of that Mediasphere training, is becoming aware of all the different forces that are trying to build your reality for you. So
well, it's because they're inside of their own construct fields, and for them, that's reality.
Huh.
And you're lost to them. You're lost, you know, and from their perspective, it's either you're evil or you're or you're just, you know, unaware that you need, you know, I mean, you could come, but they really, when we're in a construct field, people outside of it, for us, that's what reality is. Of course it is. This is the truth. And anyone outside of that truth, you either project as an enemy or as somebody who needs your help waking up. But in truth, we are all asleep in our own construct fields and not really awake to what's beyond that.
Even if your construct field is being awake.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So this construct field that
yeah.
All right. So this construct field that I'm talking about to make us aware of our construct fields is, I'll tell you a story real quick.
Yeah.
There was a Zen, there was this tradition where when you're in this kind of monastery where you're being trained, you know, to be a monk, you're told, walk in this direction. And whatever obstacle you find, you must find a way to move past it. So this monk, he goes on his trek and he comes to a big lake. So he tries to figure out how to cross it. And so he figures out, I'll cut down a tree, I'll make a canoe, and I'll go across the lake. But once he gets to the other side, he's so happy that the canoe helped him that he puts it on his back and carries it further. So the construct I'm sharing with you is a canoe. It's not designed to be carried on the other side, right? So our construct field to wake up here, our construct field even to become aware of our construct fields. Once we get to the other side, we don't need this construct field. So it's a construct field to get out of our construct fields.
It's really weird, Mark, that this morning I looked up the Buddhist story about the raft, leaving the raft behind. Yeah, this morning. I mean, I haven't looked at that in so long. And I thought there's a really useful story about letting go of what helped you cross. Yeah.
So there are
Huh.
construct fields that are solid and solidified, and then there are ones that are there to help you um, go on a quest outside of it. But it's a quest outside of a construct field. Beyond that,
Wow. Yeah.
who knows
Kind
what's
of
there.
Scary place to go for most of us.
Well,
It can
I
be
mean,
either scary or comforting. It can have both aspects.
well, what's helpful
Right.
about
Exactly.
having this kind of construct is it's kind of like if we were all caterpillars inside the cocoon. And if somebody had whispered to the caterpillar, don't worry, there's something ahead that's more magnificent. And that's the essence of the story, another story. It's the Sufi story of the Tale of the Sands. And this is a beautiful story. It's one of my favorites. Real quick. There's a river that comes from the mountains. And it's going, and it's like forming and it's doing its thing. But it comes upon a desert. And it tries and tries to cross the desert, but it can't. It just keeps getting evaporated. And it's like it's freaking out because it's dying. It can't cross the sand. But then a voice from the wind whispers, it's okay. It's okay. This is not the end. Let go. Let me carry you. Let me carry you across the sands. I will take you all the way across and let you fall on another mountain.
Mm.
And there you'll become another stream. And when the stream heard this, it remembered, oh my God, I came from a mountain. I came from rain. And it remembered the cycle. And it let go into the wind.
All right, well, we're at an hour and 40. We always tend to run long because we love all you guys and we have such
It's a
great
good story.
conversations.
And
But that's a good place to end it, I think, and to give Mark a break so we don't get too wiped out. Thank you, everyone. It was great seeing everyone. And we still
Thank
have a number of
you
us
very
here.
much.
Thank you.
What a great
Lon
opportunity.
just showed up in silhouette and disappeared. Lon.
This was heavy. This was heavy duty.
spectral.
This is good work. This is very good work you're doing.
Oh, wonderful. Mm.
Thank you. So let us all let go into the wind.
Right.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming by, Lisa.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.